You ever have one of those days? Sometimes it's one of those weeks or months. And it seems for all of us, this is one of those years. Rejection and abandonment, feeling forsaken is a common experience for all human beings. People die, friends leave, families have feuds, marriages break down. All around us is disappointment. But what about being abandoned by God? Have you ever felt that God has just forsaken you? You're desperately in need and you can't find Him anywhere? Maybe because of you're sick, or there's a situation at work or at school that's just completely out of control and it's just too hard for you to take alone, and yet you feel isolated on this island. You pray for God to deliver you and you can't hear the answer. And you desperately pray day and night and there's no relief. You're not alone. David felt abandoned and he wrote these words of despair. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the words of my groaning. O God, I cry out by day and you do not answer. By night I am not silent. David knew despair. It was part of his life. He was hunted by his king when he was a young man. The king, the guy who has all the power and authority, and he's hunting you. How are you going to get away from that? Back then, of course, they didn't have all the surveillance methods we have today. But still, it was hard for him to escape. And then later on, he becomes king. And I've heard it's good to be the king. He was the one in power now. He could do anything. He was surrounded by the mightiest army in the land, both his guerrillas that used to hang with him in his early days, and also the mighty men of Israel. They were all surrounded by him. Seems like he could do anything he wanted. In fact, one day he decides that he's not going to go out to war. It was they were going out to war, Israel was, and he should have been at the head of the army. But he decided, I deserve a break. I'm the king. They don't need me. I'm just going to kick back in my palace. And he goes outside one day and he sees this beautiful young woman bathing. And he decides that he's going to have her, even though she is the young wife of one of his mighty men who's out there battling right now. But he is the king. And so he takes her. And then he finds out she is pregnant, and he decides he needs to do something about this. And so his decision is to he brings Uriah back. He has this elaborate plot. Well, Uriah is going to sleep with his wife, and then the baby's going to be his, and everything's going to be okay. But Uriah apparently is smarter than David thought he was. And it doesn't happen. So instead, David has Uriah killed. And sin is compounded upon sin, and this untouchable man, the king, thinks he got away with it. And he kind of sort of did. Except that God was watching, and God knew. And the prophet Nathan calls him in and lays his sin out before him. And David is a broken, desperate man. He realizes what he had done and how he had sinned against God. And he begs this word. He feels that God has forsaken him. Why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? Only God could save him. Jesus quoted those very same words from the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus our Lord feels abandoned at the cross. So if Jesus can say these words, and David the king can say these words, how can we see ourselves as different? There are times when we feel that God has forsaken us. The great hymn writer, William Cowper, who wrote There Is a Fountain Filled with Blood, and many others, he suffered from depression. And he often thought that God was rejecting him. And yet he would sit down and write these hymns. And Mother Teresa, whose very name seems to us the equivalent of Christian service. I mean, if there was anyone that was more Christ-like than Mother Teresa, I want to know who that person is. She gave her life demonstrating her love for Jesus by helping the people that are most forsaken on the earth. And yet in her journal she would write that she felt that God was far from her, that she could not feel His presence like she once did. And she continued to serve. What do you do with this? What do you do when you have these situations in your heart where you feel abandoned by your friends, abandoned by your family, abandoned by your God? When you seem like you're suffering and God doesn't even care. You know, there's a little game called the popcorn game that kindergarten kids play. And they all sit down and on a key word, they jump up and they pop up. Sometimes they have variations of the game where half the class, the boys pop up and then the girls pop up depending on the words. But there was one little boy one time, he wasn't popping up. He was sitting in his chair. He was sad and he wouldn't play. And the teacher asked him, well, why aren't you playing popcorn? He says, I'm just sitting at the bottom burning. And have you ever felt like that? Like everybody around you is popping, but you're sitting at the bottom of the pan, burning up. Does it shake your faith when you feel like that? Well, David, Jesus, and Job as well, who felt God had abandoned them, they have an answer here. They say, take it to God. If you're angry, take it to God. If you feel forsaken, take it to God. Mother Teresa never failed to take her despair to God. She kept writing about it in her journal. That's how we know. She continually took it to God. William Cowper, he continued to write hymns out of his despair. Because God does listen. And He is there. And it may take some time, but He's still there. You know, when a person complains about a service that you've done, you know, like at McDonald's, I was taught that if somebody complains about their food, what they're actually doing is giving me a second chance to make it right. What they're doing in this is saying that I know that you can fix this, that this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And so when we bring our cares before God, even though we feel He isn't answering us, we're understanding that He is a great God who can and will answer our prayers in His time. We need to focus on God's unchanging nature. See, the psalm that David was writing, Psalm 22, was not all despair. In verse 3, he starts to change. He says, you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the praise of Israel. In you our fathers put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. They cried to you, and were saved. In you they trusted, and were not disappointed. The Bible tells us to walk by faith, and not by sight. You know, one of the dark moments in my life, and it wasn't that bad, was having to stand guard duty. I was a private or a private first class or something, and I had to stand guard duty around the armory, carrying a shotgun for 4 hours on a walking, just circling around the armory with that shotgun. In October, I'll never forget, it was October, and it wasn't a hot October in San Antonio either. It was a cold October in North Carolina, and it was a 4-hour rotating shift, so every once in a while I had to do this from 4 to 8 in the morning. Folks, that is the most miserable time on this planet. 4 to 8 in the morning is those hours where everybody's asleep. The night watch is already secured from their work, and I'm standing out there alone, and it's cold. It is so cold. But what kept me going was, of course, the threat of court-martial. But what kept me from despair was the fact that I knew that sun was going to rise. It may be dark and cold now, but soon that sun would come. And it would start out as the sky would turn a little bit gray, and the gray would become lighter and lighter. And with every moment I felt, oh, the sun is getting closer. The darkness is going away. And eventually there'd be a little dot in the sky, and everything would be bright. And you know, since it is October, the days were shorter, so it took longer. It wasn't like a summer day where 4 o'clock in the morning the sun is up. And then I knew that I would be relieved. Someone would come, take the shotgun away from me, count the shells, because who knows what might happen in the middle of the night. And luckily all the shells were there, and I can go home. I get in my car, go home, lay down and sleep however long I was allowed to sleep. In our darkness and in despair, God is like that. We know He's out there, and we know He's going to arrive. And just like the sun that was coming up, not only warming the sky, but letting me know that relief was coming. We know that God is coming. And I wonder if that's exactly why He gave us day and night. He gave us winter and spring. So we would know that in despair, hope is over the horizon. You know, the Jews were instructed every year to celebrate the Passover as a remembrance of the time that they were rescued from slavery in Egypt. That God came and took them out. We need to remember that God is our deliverer, and He is out there. It doesn't matter what you're going through today. God is there. I know you all know that story of the footprints in the sand. You know, you see the two sets, and then some was one set. And where were you? Those were my darkest times, and that was carrying you. God is there even though we can't see them. He is there for us. Halfway through Psalm 22, the mood changes completely. And David says, I will declare your name to my brothers in the congregation. I will praise you. David's son was dying. It was part of the cost that the price that he was paying for his sin with Bathsheba, his sin against Uriah, his sin against God. And while his son was sick and dying, David fasted and prayed. And as soon as the child died, David got up and he washed his face. The fast was over. He now belonged to God. And he told the servants, you know, I won't see him again. We will not see him again on this earth, but we will be reunited in heaven. That's my paraphrase. I know it's not exactly what it said. So another hymn writer, Horatio Spafford, he lost his children at sea in a storm. And when he was going to reunite with his wife, again taking a ship across the Atlantic, he was told the very spot where the accident had happened. And he went down and he wrote these words. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. There is a victory at the end of our trials. You know, the Bible tells us the story of Job and how Job lost everything. And so at the end, when everything is restored to Job, he's given twice as much of everything he lost. Except his children. He was given as many children as he lost. That's a puzzle there, isn't it? Why does he get twice as many cattle, but only the same number of children? Well, if you think about it, you realize that his children were doubled. His children did not disappear. His children were in paradise, waiting for him. They were not lost. So he did, in fact, have twice as many children as when he started. Some in heaven and some on earth. And so we know that death is not the end. We try to cling on to this life so hard, And yet we have to understand that death is not the end. Death, in fact, is our reward. It's not even really death. It's a transition from this life to the next. So that's why, in the middle of this play, I am here and I worship God. Because I am not afraid. I am here to serve Him. And losing God, if you will, turning my back on Him, is worse than anything else that could happen. Now, I'm not saying that I want to die. I'm not saying that I'm not afraid of death. Not at all. What I am saying is that I am here to worship God because God continues no matter what. And we will all be together, those of us who believe in God, and I'm trusting that everyone here is a follower of Jesus Christ. If you're not, we can settle that right now. But I am confident that we're going to see each other again on the other side. Because God is there, even if we can't feel Him. And right now I feel like I'm walking. Instead of a shotgun, I have a sword in my hand. And walking for no reason, because I never tried to take that armory. Never have, and if that armory is still standing, they never have since then. But I was doing my duty, and we are doing our duty now in worshiping God and serving Him. We're going to sing another song as you think on these things, and what is God telling you? Can you feel Him? If you can't, reach out for Him. He is there.
Baptist Temple is alive and well. We are doing what we have always done, reaching out to our community to meet their needs. We are connecting with our members by teleconferencing, an online worship service, and by telephone. God is not finished with Baptist Temple. And after this pandemic is over, we will emerge from this stronger than ever. You can send your tithes and offerings to Baptist Temple, 901 East Drexel Avenue, San Antonio, Texas, 78210. Or go to our website at www.mybtsa.org. That's www.mybtsa.org. And click on the donate button to donate with PayPal. Always remember this: be strong in the Lord and be of good courage. May God bless you.